Jennifer, and let me
Z, can I say? Sure. You're born and raised in Addis Ababa. How familiar are you there in the big city with what is happening in the countryside 3 hours from the city, marriage by abduction?
Born and raised in the city, and I think when I was growing up there, for a country is the second biggest country in Africa, we had only 4,000 kilometers of paved roads, so we didn't know what was going on outside of the city, except for the news reels that we see and whatnot. So the tradition kind of exists everywhere within the country, but those of us who grew up in the city kind of were shielded from the day-to-day life of the village. So I had an idea of what abduction from marriage is, but it wasn't around me on a daily basis. I didn't have a family member who talked about it or who kind of was abducted into marriage or whatnot, so I didn't know much about it.
And the film is based on true events. How did you come across the story of Beirut happening in '96?
I left to go to school to the U.S. literally about 5 months after this happened in 1996. So while I was in the U.S., I did not know anything about it. So after graduation, I went back to Ethiopia, and around 2005, I met the brother of the lawyer at a friend's dinner, and he told me about his sister and said, you need to make a film about my sister. And I said, sure. But he told me her name, and I was on my way back to Los Angeles, and once I got there, I typed in her name, and literally about 1,000 pages showed up on Google. So I read up pretty much everything that she's done, and this particular case kind of got my attention, and 4 months later I jumped on the plane and went back and asked to meet her, and that's how it happened.
And how did you find Tizita, the wonderful actress, performing Beirut? How did you discover her for your film?
We were sort of, Lila was with me in Addis when we were casting. I think casting took the longest time, apart from trying to raise the money, of course. But we were in Ethiopia for 8 months, trying to find all the actors. I was very adamant in finding the right people for the project, and even though we had a chance to do this film in English, would have made it a lot quicker, but it didn't happen. So Meron is an established actor, a university graduate from Addis Ababa University School of Arts. And a couple of the guys, the village elder, the old man who's in the middle, the guy who plays Hirut's mother, and 2 other people were established actors in Ethiopia. But Hirut, that was the hardest person to find, because they didn't have roles for young people in theater or in television. So we literally made 6,000 flyers and went from elementary school to elementary school, trying to have these kids to come in to the studio and have a reading with us. Nothing happened, and then 2 weeks before we shot, I went to my casting director said, "Oh, there's this old man, an actor, who gives after-school theater acting lessons to young kids." And of course, so we drove there, and it happened to be my elementary school. So there, in my 7th grade class, was this group of young kids learning how to act, and she was in the middle there, sort of waiting her turn to take on sort of like a vocal lesson, I guess. And I saw her, and right away I knew that was the girl for the part.
There are not many films being made in Ethiopia. Maybe a question to the producer. What is the challenge to film in Ethiopia, to raise money and to deal with all the techniques?
It's hard. It was really hard. We started financing. I came onto the project in 2009, and we had offers to sell the script, do it in English, put Halle Berry as the lawyer, and another supermodel was mentioned, and we had a very specific vision. We could have taken that money, and we didn't, so we decided to do very unconventional, and we just did it grassroots, approaching like-minded individuals. A lot of Ethiopian people supported this film from all over the world, amazing artists, amazing painters, even Coldplay's bassist, Guy Berryman, sold his guitar for us at an auction. I mean, so we just really went out there to try and raise this money under, alternative means. And crowdsourcing, we did Kickstarter, so all those names are our Kickstarter campaigns, and that's the way we had to make this film. It took us longer, slower, but we got to make it the way we wanted, so it was really important for us.
And just to add, seeing all those names at the end of the Kickstarter was like, I think for all of us, looking at all the people in our lives, for all our lives, because they were friends you knew very well and friends you didn't know, but they all came, and it's really a powerful way to put a film up. But just specifically to your question about the challenges, I think we all knew the challenges of shooting on 35 millimeter and processing in India, and I think we went into it incredibly prepared, but you're never prepared enough, and it was walking in a high wire, but we had an amazing team that you got through the ring of fire. You're always putting out fires. Some days there were rings of fire, but we somehow put it out, and we somehow got it done.
Yeah, I would like to ask the cinematographer, how did you experience to shoot and to have your stuck in India and waiting for, I don't know how long time?
Just great, easy. No, it was hard. I didn't see dailies for 9 days because of the custom, and that was stressful. But the other part of it, I'm so happy to be part of it and join this team of passionate people and believe in the stories, like real stories. So it's worth it.
Questions?
Yeah.
You can applaud. Question from your side. Raise your hands. There's a question. Do we have a microphone?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for this wonderful film. I really enjoyed it much. As I read, the film was shot on location, and I'm interested in how was the film received, or did you show it in the village, and what were the reactions?
Unfortunately, we haven't shown the film in Ethiopia yet, so the reason is we finished late, and then right away we submitted to Berlinale and to Sundance, and we were accepted right away, so we had to go to Sundance before this. And so our plan is right after Berlinale we're going to go to Ethiopia, and our plans is actually to go into these villages where there is no theaters, and we're hoping to take a projector and a white cloth and gather everybody like that happened under the tree and show it there. So in terms of sort of previous experience, in terms of while we were shooting the film, this story, though it happened in 1996, the public was very much aware of it. It was, to Maza's credit, the lawyer, were very tactician in a way to bring the media into sort of the case, and usually court cases were not on your newspapers or radio. So people know about it, so we didn't have any pushback. We were uploaded, and as you've seen, a lot of those Kickstarter names, most of them are from Ethiopia.
Questions? Yeah, please. Yes, please. Do we have the microphone? It's coming. No, please. Yeah, no, it's easier because it's really hard to understand you. It's a big cinema.
You can ask.
I had one question. What happened to Hilud from the moment of the film ends on?
By the time we got together to make this film, it was very difficult for us to find her. As was told in this story, that she lived in an orphanage, and not a lot of people had access to her, so the people who represented her told us that it was going to be very difficult for us to find her, so we didn't get a chance to talk to her. What we know is that she's safe, and she is in Ethiopia, but the people in the village does not know where she is, and we were not allowed to communicate with her for her safety.
There's one more question.
I've
Yeah.
got the mic.
And then we go to you.
Right. You say you're going to take it to Ethiopia. I mean, I travelled a bit in Ethiopia 6 years ago. What a fantastic country. I grew up in East Africa, so I'm an African. Anyway, so fantastic and wonderful, wonderful movie. When you're going to show it in the village or villages in Ethiopia, how do you think it will come across? I mean, sometimes it's difficult, you know, to get rid of deep-seated traditions. And in terms of, you know, female equality and all the rest of it, I mean, how do you think it still is in, you know, up country in Ethiopia?
I think we've made a great stride in the last couple of years in terms of gender equality and violence against women. There are a lot of NGOs that are working on that. The government is very keen in addressing that issue. To be honest with you, I seriously don't know how that's going to go, but my hope is that it will give us a chance to have an open dialogue. And we were very careful in terms of not pointing fingers at men or the lack of enforcement of the constitutional law. But at the same time, when we were filming, we had a lot of support from these villages. We actually went to the villages that this happened in. And one of the scenes when she was abducted, the villagers who were watching us, actually, every time you saw the camera, there's about 100 people behind it. Seriously, yeah, so the actors performing in that kind of situations was amazing. So on one of the scenes where we see the abduction, the villagers were screaming, "No, you're doing it all wrong." And a couple of them actually volunteered to show us how to do it. So, but I know Marek's got more to say about this.
You have to understand, Maza is a powerhouse woman who still does so much, and the people love her there. She actually started the First Women's Bank. She's chairperson of the First Women's Bank. She's the gender advisor to the ECA, which is a special UN commission. She sits on multiple boards all around the world for women's rights, so she's a beloved person, and everyone respects and loves her, so I think that will also help the way in which the film is received there.
Now we have you in the, yes, please.
What does the title "different" mean?
Great question. It's a powerful word that has a double meaning in Amharic. And on its everyday use, it means courage or to dare. And it also means the act of being raped.
Here's a question in the front, I just give you that.
So the case of Hirut, have other cases followed? I mean, I'm pretty sure you've been confronted with the question after India and those rape and trials that followed. So do you know anything? How's the situation today in Ethiopia?
This was a monumental case in terms of having a great effect on the day-to-day life of young girls in Ethiopia. So in 2004, the laws were revisioned, and so Marek can explain more on this, but what happened is, since then, there are two types. Abduction is one of it, and then there's also another one where the father gives up his daughter to another person for lineage or for land or whatnot, and that also became illegal. So the cases that happened after that were in terms of having resolution. What this case did is empowered women or their mothers or their fathers, even in this case, to actually go to the law and approach the police and kind of deal with that in that way.
So there's a division, as you saw in the film, between customary law and constitutional courts. So this case really opened the door for constitutional courts. Importantly, after the case, though the case happened in 1996, a lot of women's rights community all around the world mobilized to help Maza and her organization, and there were revisions in the Penal Code in 2004 that defined any gender-based violence as a crime for the first time in Ethiopian history. So gender-based violence, abduction became not only, we had the rule actually that abduction was outlawed, but it wasn't enforced, and there was a loophole in the law that if you married her, then there would be no criminal charges. So that went away. So it was, it started to be enforced. There were criminal charges regardless. And then female genital mutilation, the cutting, actually also got included in that law. So those were huge revisions in the criminal code for the first time. And there's been so many changes. A lot of really great work being done. LFA doesn't happen as much. It still happens, unfortunately. Actually, 30 to 40%, depending on what studies you're looking at. Mostly in the rural areas, not so much in the city. I actually had an aunt who was abducted in the city like 40 years ago. So it doesn't really happen in cities now. And like any change, it takes time, but the codes were revised and, the culture is slowly changing and catching up.
Questions? And you have to wait because we don't see you. Yes, there's a question.
Any more
Yeah, we have
for next film?
1 second. It's about your next film? It's about your next film, so you can ask.
Only here.
That's all. Any plans for your next one?
Sure. I'm interested in this kind of human stories, things that connect us all. Ethiopia is a beautiful place, got great tradition, got great stories, and I've been traveling there for the last 8 years or 9 years, and trying to find stories, and I have many, yes, and hopefully we'll do one next year. And okay, there's one more person there.
Well, first, congratulations. I love that really touching. And also, I wanted to ask you, what was, as a filmmaker, your most challenge when making this film based on a true story?
Yeah, it's great question actually. Well, being a person from the culture myself, the big challenge was to be able to bring this story in a way that not just I saw it, but in a way that the people in Ethiopia see it, the villagers, what's their point of view, why do they do what they do, and it's easy to create a protagonist and an antagonist and rooting for one and demonizing the other. In this case, that wasn't what happened. I spent 3 years going from village to village and talking to people. I talked to the people who worked on this case, the courts, the police, and when you talk to them, as far as they're concerned, the perpetrator on this case was Hirut. They didn't see anything wrong with what the guy did. So it became kind of a study of the tradition, a study of the culture. That was one of the biggest challenges I had as a writer and as a filmmaker, to be able to create a cohesive story that's complex enough, that's moving enough, with enough drama to capture the audience and be able to also put across the point that I wanted to make. In terms of making the film, there were many. And from the get-go, we had a lot of challenges, but one of it is be able to get the right people for the project. So I finished the script in 2008. Meret and Lacey joined in 2009. Lilai came in 2011. Monica came in 2013. 2012, yes. And then Aga came last. And actually, I got myself made in Ethiopia and with Monica too, because I was doing casting there. For us, what was more important is in terms of doing this film to protect the artistic integrity of it. And each of us had a way to do it. Monica and I debated on how we should light the film, or should we light it at all, or how to move the camera, and also the editing, should it be stylized or not. And so these are things that happen in filmmaking, and doing it in Ethiopia kind of, it was a weird thing to do, because it was like, you're making these decisions where you are surrounded by 500 people and they don't know why you're there, and why she has a camera that's about 85 pounds on her, and then why, yes,
Why he wasn't helping her carry
why I wasn't helping her carry it. Yeah. So, yeah, great challenges, but it was a great chapter for us in Ethiopia as film industry is concerned, because this was the fourth film to ever shoot on 35mm film. So we had a great experience doing it.
I think your question is really amazing, and I think after Z would do drafts and say, what do you guys think, we talk about it, the finding that balance between knowing this so well, I mean, he's been researching this and he knows every intimate detail, but also letting it breathe to allow the drama come out, because he's writing it. He wasn't at every moment that you see on film. He created it. So I think that he really worked to find that balance. For example, that scene under the trees is a fantastic moment in the film of hearing, really, I think, where the balance of having this dramatic tension, but really being true to the place where it was, and really being written by someone who heard those people and just channeled through him. So I just wanted to add that. Great question.
Yeah, here's a question in the front. Maybe I'll just give you that.
So what was the role of Angelina Jolie in the movie?
And I thought I wasn't going to be asked that question. Great story, actually. So Angelina joined us about 5 months ago when we were doing post-production of this film. And the way it happened is one of our executive producers, Julie Moretu, and Angelina have a common friend, and I think Different was mentioned at a dinner, and somebody said to somebody, oh, Angelina should see this film. And it happened, and I was asked to send her the film, and it was my first cut, and I was very nervous to send her a not complete film, but I did, and she saw it, and she called me. She was in Australia doing a film, and she called me directly and told me how she loved it, and she wanted to be part of it, and how she asked me basically, like, what do you want and how could I help you? And I said, you'd be the great ambassador for this film. So that's how it came about.
Okay, one last question because you're in front.
Whatever happened to her sister?
The little one? So the kind of the heartbreaking story for me was also what happened to the little sister, Aragash. And I did not know about what happened to Aragash until later on when I went to the village multiple times. And often enough, when something happens in one household, the ramifications kind of go with the family. So it affected her as well. So she was pulled out of school and kept at home because her older sister was abducted. And then Hiro got abducted, and then the parents were very afraid of the same fate happening to the little one, so they killed her. So as far as I know, that she's at home, tending to the cattle, and helping her mom fetch water and wood. She's safe as long as she's at home. And part of this whole, the retaliation and the vengeance culture that we have in Ethiopia is that no one would come to your home to harm you, per se, but if she was caught, per se, she was carrying water or coming back from school, that would still happen to her. Great question.
We have to go for the next film. It's so great to have you in Berlin. Sit with me. It's again the best show. A wonderful team. Please tell your friends. Please tell the camera how I want to watch. Thank you so much.